I know this is like the 40,000th time you guys have seen me in this hoodie this month, but it's new, it's comfy. Get off my back. That's the way to do it, Scott. Just be aggressive right out of the gate. How you doing, you wonderful nerds? Scott here, and we are back with another book recommendation. We did one of these last year around this time period, because you know, shopping season and all that. So I wanted to do one again with some more updated book recommendations, stuff that I've read this year, stuff that has helped make a lot of NerdSync videos this year, and you guys were really interested in it. So let's just jump into it. Just so you guys know, these aren't going to be comic book recommendations. These are going to be books about comic books, the history, culture, art, that kind of stuff behind the comic book industry, comic book creators, or just comic book superheroes. I love superheroes specifically, so that's what these are going to focus on a lot. And if you're interested in buying any of these books we're about to go over, links will be in the description down below. They are affiliate links, which means they don't cost you anything extra, but we get a little bit of a kickback from it. So it's basically like you're buying these books anyway. We get a little help from it. It's a good deal. I'm not gonna be retreading a ton of ground from last year, but I will go over my 3 classics, my most recommended books that I could give you guys. These are very like cliche and iconic at this point. So number 1, of course, has to go to Scott McCloud's Understanding Comic Books. If you're really interested in the form and function of how comic books are created, how they can be used to tell stories, this is just an all-around amazing book. And of course, it is told in a comic book style, so it's a comic book about comic books. Can't go wrong there. Then, of course, we have Sean Howe's Marvel Comics, The Untold Story. This is such a huge, dense book. It's enormous. I've gotten a lot of use out of it for videos. Definitely check it out if you're interested in the Marvel Comics history. And the 3rd and final classic book I would recommend has to go to Brian Cronin's Was Superman a Spy? You guys know that I pimp this book out so much because there's just, it's tiny, but it's dense and packed full of information. You probably saw a bunch of highlights and dog ears going on in this book. I have just read this thing almost cover to cover dozens of times. It's just incredible. If you just want a lot of good comic book trivia in a short little package, go check it out. Also, of course, I would recommend the philosophy and pop culture series like Wonder Woman in philosophy, Spider-Man in philosophy, Batman in philosophy, Avengers, all that kind of stuff. I've used those to write dozens of videos, it seems, here at NerdSync, so always great stuff. Check them out. But that's the old stuff. Guys, we're gonna move on to the new stuff this year. Now, all of the books I'm about to mention are books that I do own, some of them physically, some of them digitally, some of them in audiobook format, or some combination of the 3. So a big theme of the videos here at NerdSync and just my reading that I've done here this year has to do with comic book history, so there's gonna be a lot of those books. And I say let's start it out with a fun one. This is a comic book history of comics. So very similar to Scott McCloud's book where it is a comic book about comics, this is a comic book about comic book history. And it's really funny, it's really well done. And look, obviously, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I'm a guy who likes pictures in my books. That's why I like comic books. I was never a big reader in school, that's certainly changed nowadays, but if you were like me and you don't really like to just look at words and you want pictures to coincide stuff, but you also still wanna learn about the world and about history, this thing, it's gonna treat you right. This next one I don't own physically, but it is the Caped Crusade, Batman and the Rise of Nerd Culture by Glenn Weldon. I use this book a lot on the Adam West video that we did earlier this year. That was just like one chapter of that book. There's so much more fascinating history about Batman and the just Batman franchise that I could spend days or weeks on. What I love about this book though is the author Glenn Weldon is a super huge fan of Batman, and you can just tell by reading this book that it was written by someone who absolutely adores the Caped Crusader. And those are the best books when you find an author who's just really passionate about what they're talking about. So if you want to learn about Batman history from a super hardcore Batman fan, definitely check this one out. I feel like I'm gonna be saying the phrase check this one out a lot in this video. We should maybe let's put a counter on screen. Maybe not. The next one I also don't own physically, but I own it digitally. It is Wonder Woman Unbound by Tim Hanley. I use this one for the mod era Wonder Woman, and I'm gonna be using it for whatever I eventually do the follow-up video about Wonder Woman and bondage imagery and all of that stuff. Tim Hanley, just based on this book, is an incredible author, and he has other books out there that I haven't read about Lois Lane and Catwoman, kind of in similar styles. Very interested in getting my hands on those. In a similar vein, if you want more Wonder Woman history, check out The Secret History of Wonder Woman by Jill Lepore. Now, something I want to say, comparing this one to the last one, Wonder Woman Unbound. This is a really good book if you're interested in the life of William Moulton Marston. It is just super duper detailed, more so than Wonder Woman Unbound. Wonder Woman Unbound is more about the character and I guess the franchise of Wonder Woman. This has a lot of that too, but it has a much bigger focus on William Moulton Marston, Wonder Woman's creator. I would recommend, though, steer clear probably of the audiobook version of this one, because it's read by the author, and sometimes that can be okay, but in this case, you can listen to a free sample on Audible, decide for yourself, but for me, kind of fell a little bit flat there. But either way, the information in here, still really great. Continuing with recommending pairs of books or series of books, I have to give it up to superhero comics of the Golden Age and horror comics. Now these are books by Mike Bentley, I believe, is that correct? I don't know, who can tell? Benton, Mike Benton, I got that wrong. Now I've never heard of these books. I only found them because they were referenced as a source in an article that I was researching for something. I don't think I can remember. Oh, it was the video I did about why people destroyed Action Comics #1, why people purposefully destroyed their first copy of Superman. And I had seen it referenced, some information referenced in one of these books, and I started looking into them. And guys, if I could recommend just a few books off this list that you should definitely get, check these books out. So they're basically textbooks about comics. They're incredibly well written, really snappy reads, a lot of pictures. Gotta love that. This is the horror comics one, but of course, the superhero comics of the Golden Age is another great one. There's a whole series of these. I only have these two, but you can bet I'm going to be looking at getting a lot more. Oh no, I'm flubbing this one up. But just to give you an example of some of the incredible writing in this book that really sold me on it. Come here. There's this one passage in this book about Superman that really just made me, it's probably my favorite passage of any comic book history, probably just anything I've ever read this whole year, maybe this decade, maybe my life. Who knows? Maybe that says something about me, but let me go ahead and read this to you guys. For a while, Siegel and Schuster's tiny art studio at 10905 Amore Avenue was the only place in the world where stories about superheroes were dreamed, written, and drawn. But not for long. God, I love that. So that just gives you an example. They read like superhero textbooks, but they are absolutely just masterfully done. And that's gonna be a theme for a lot of the books this year, actually, are authors who are really great at crafting stories. And so, of course, I have to mention 10 Cent Plague. This is by, I believe it's pronounced David Hajdu. I don't know. I gotta tell you, this book, it's so incredibly thick, but man, you can just fly through it. It is so well written. I'll be honest, normally really giant books like this kind of scare me off, especially when they're very dense. This is about one very specific subject, very specific time in the comic book industry. This is during the time when comic books were basically on trial for people thought they were causing juvenile delinquency. There was the whole Comics Code Authority scare. There's a lot of earlier stuff that happens, like the rise of horror comics and crime comics. So it really just sets the stage. And there's a chapter in here, a chapter or two about the actual trial, the Senate subcommittee hearing on juvenile delinquency, that just reads like almost a crime drama. It's so good, and it has a really good way of just painting a word picture of what that time period was like, what these people were probably thinking, and what they were doing. And there's so much information in here I never knew about. You know, there's stuff about people on drugs. There's stuff about, you know, like little cutaways to like a Jack Kirby just be, you know, somewhere else watching something on TV and going like, oh, that stupid moron. It just reads almost like a TV crime drama about comic books. It's awesome. So that's 10 Cent Plague. Let's talk about another cent value. We have 12 Cent Archie by Bart Beatty. And again, I don't own this one physically, but I do have it digitally. And if you are interested in Archie comics at all, this one is incredible. This is kind of sort of about history of Archie, but it's also really about just analyzing the Archie comics brand, specifically from a very small part of Archie lifespan. You'll recall that I used this book in the video about Jughead's hat. That is just one chapter of this book. Another thing I really enjoy about it is that every single chapter, every single section can be read in whatever order that you want. It's not in any, doesn't follow any particular story. There's no particular flow to it. It reads however you want it to. It's like a choose your own adventure of interesting information. And so we're going to piggyback off of that and move into more of the books about comic book culture, or how comic books have affected culture or have been affected by culture. This is another thing I've been super interested in this year. And I think the most obvious example of that is our video that we did about Superman versus the KKK. Actually, wait, I do have that book somewhere. Aha! I don't know why I didn't think I have it. I do have it right here. This is by Rick Bowers. This is basically the book on the subject. It's really quick. I also have the audiobook version of it. Something I will warn about this book, though, is it gets a little repetitive in a couple different areas. There are parts throughout the book where you'll hear the same sentence or the same thoughts said in almost exactly the same way, just to kind of reiterate, to emphasize a certain point again. So it's interesting, but it's also a little bit repetitive in that sense. But like I said, if you're interested in this specific subject, there's a ton of stuff I didn't have time to go into in the video that we did. This is the book to check out. Superman versus the Ku Klux Klan by Rick Bowers. But I think, let me try that one again. I think we need to dive back into books with lots of visuals and pictures in them. So let's go to Comic Art Propaganda. Now this one has been one of my favorite books this year. If the cover alone doesn't sell you on this thing with how cool it is, the information inside is pretty incredible, very in-depth, all about how comic books are presented in wartime, in regards to religion and politics and very specific eras of culture. It also is really interesting because it not only shows the American side of comic books about, obviously Superman and Batman going off to war and Captain America or non-superhero stuff, but it also dives into other countries. There are versions of comic book propaganda that were popping up to combat our own comic book propaganda. So it's super duper interesting if you're interested, obviously in history and culture and just this specific propaganda use of comic books. Really great stuff. I also used that in the Flash video about Flash peddling comic book propaganda, along with this book right here, government issue, Comics for the People. So where that last book has to do a lot with probably a little bit more mainstream stuff, or, it deals with superheroes, it deals with little cartoons and whatnot. This is very specifically comic books that were issued by the government, hence the name government issue. So instead of just like Marvel or DC or whoever who were, trying to be political at the time, which is what that last book would have been about, this is very specifically an active approach to the American government trying to use comic books to teach about ideas, to warn about other things, and it's massive, lots of visuals, lots of great stuff that you'll definitely recognize, like Bert the Turtle, obviously Smokey the Bear. Just a lot of great stuff. If you're interested in the more government side of comic books, it's definitely a niche area. It's a good coffee table book, though, I think. It definitely fits in on a coffee table, more so than maybe this one does. It's maybe a bit much. And kind of lastly, in this specific section, I have to give it up to Comic Books and the Cold War. This is one of my favorites book formats, which is just a series of essays by really smart people writing about different subjects. I used this in the Flash video as well. In fact, this has a very big section dedicated to the Flash in it. Definitely pulled heavily from that. So if you're interested in comic books during the Cold War era specifically, I can't imagine a better book than this one. It also has some great stuff about Jack Kirby, Fantastic Four. There's a section about Skrulls that I'm thinking about doing a video about, especially when a certain Captain Marvel movie comes out, maybe. So yeah, look forward to more stuff from this one. super great. And I've just got a couple other books that are more analytical or just kind of random out there. We actually just did a video like 2 days ago about the legalities of unmasking Batman, of revealing Batman's secret identity, and a lot of that stuff came from right here, The Law of Superheroes, and also the corresponding blog that this was inspired off of and taken from, which is Law and the Multiverse, I believe. So this is a very niche book here if you want to learn about how superheroes fit into law. You know, this is the book on the subject. Tons of great info in here, really easy to read, really easy to understand, especially for a book about law, which could be very confusing, but highly recommend it. It gets you to think. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean. I don't even have to elaborate on that one. It gets you to think about stuff that you might not have thought about. Anyway, moving on, if you are very specifically interested in some analysis on your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man here, I have to recommend Web Slinger. I picked this one up at a used bookstore earlier this year, and if you watched my collab that I did with the Super Carlin brothers, I was actually headed out to see them, and a few days prior, we didn't have a video topic yet, so I pulled this off the shelf and I started reading through it, and there was a chapter about why J. Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man, and that evolved into our video that we did over on their channel. I think I used this for another thing as well, but I don't entirely know what. Oh, that's right. It's an upcoming video that I won't spoil, but definitely use this one again. Very interesting stuff. And again, it's just a series of essays. You can read it in any order that you want. It's not really a story. Just pick one that sounds interesting, go for it. Good recommendation for Spider-Man fans out there. And then we're gonna close it down with, I can't remember if I recommended this book last year, but I don't think I had it physically last year at least. Picked it up again from another used bookstore. This is Superhero, The Secret Origin of a Genre by Peter Coogan. I've used that name. I've said his name a lot on this channel in the past. I think I used this in the video about whether superhero is a genre. Very fitting. I also planned on using this video or this book for other videos in the future. So again, it's just a very interesting analysis and deep dive into superheroes as a storytelling device. A lot of great information in here. I have to imagine I'm going to be referencing this book a lot more in the future. Great stuff. I think that's gonna do it for the book recommendations, all the stuff that I've read this year. So once again, links will be in the description down below if any of these interest you at all. And even if you're not interested in them right now, if down the line, if you're like, hey, I wanna buy this book, remember, come back to this video, use some of the links below. They are affiliate links, which means you get it for the same price you would anyway, but it helps out the channel, it helps out us. It's a win-win. But I want to move on to one last section, which is going to be my wish list. Books that I haven't read, so I can't really recommend them to you, but they've been on my Amazon wish list for a really long time. Hopefully I'll pick some up for the holiday season for myself or from my family. And I just want to go into a little bit of that right now. So as I referenced earlier, I want to check out those other books by Tim Hanley. There's a Catwoman one and a Lois Lane one. I haven't done a video on either of those two. I think I've touched on Lois Lane a little bit here and there, but never Catwoman. That seems like an oversight to me. So definitely want to see if those can produce any videos. Also, more Mike Benton books, more of these amazing histories of comic books, these comic book textbooks. Those are awesome. I need to find more of those. They're very hard to track down. I always have to buy them off of eBay instead of Amazon. There's a book I saw called Take That Adolf, The Fighting Comic Books of the Second World War. And I gotta be honest, I'm sure a lot of the stuff in that book is also covered in some of the other books that I talked about, but one Amazon review called it a Nazi punching extravaganza, which how can I not own that book with that review? Sounds like a great time. I also am in the mood to make more videos about Captain America, and of course, where else could I go for some Captain America goodness other than The Virtues of Captain America by my buddy Mark D. White. I cannot believe that I don't have this book. So hopefully I can pick it up and then make some more Captain America videos for you guys because, I don't know, I like that man. I like that boy. He's a cool dude. Both Captain America and Mark D. White. There's another one called Hero A Go-Go, which by the looks of it is all about superhero like Silver Age and camp and all that great stuff. After making the Adam West video, this book has me be so incredibly excited to dive more into that realm. I especially want to just, I don't know, there's a part of me that wants to analyze the Silver Age a little bit and maybe make it a whole video about Jimmy Olsen and how Jimmy Olsen was kind of the embodiment of the Silver Age and its goofiness and its campiness. So I don't know, seems like a fun book. I want to check it out. And then 2 books that have been on my list for what seemed like forever: Super Black, American Pop Culture and Black Superheroes, and also, to go along with that, Black Comics, Politics of Race and Representation. So I think those obviously speak for themselves. I've been really interested in the topic of representation and race, and I'm planning on hopefully doing a video about that subject in the future. I don't mean to keep teasing things that may or may not happen, but I don't know, seems like a fun time. And that is not at all an exhaustive list of everything that I wanted to cover, but this is a really great place, hopefully, to get you started if you're interested in learning more about comic book history, comic book culture, comic book art. These books and the books that I recommended from last year should be a great place to get you started. I think I recommended a little bit more variety last year because I was just interested in more different things. This year I've had a very heavy focus on history and culture, so if that's not your jam, then go watch last year's. I covered a lot more there, I think. I don't know, maybe I didn't. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, if you haven't seen our latest video about whether it's illegal or legal to unmask Batman, to reveal Batman's secret identity, go check that one out. There'll be a link somewhere, probably at the end of the video or in the description down below. Either way, if you're new to the channel, we normally make videos that are more thoughtful and educational about comic books and superheroes every single week, like the books that we recommended just now. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and hit that big sexy subscribe button and tap that bell icon to join the notification squad so you never miss an upload. My favorite nerds on the internet. Click a tap right here to watch our Batman video, or right down here for something YouTube's mysterious algorithm thinks you'll enjoy. My name is Scott, reminding you to read between the panels and grow smarter through comics. See ya.